At my company, power wasn't measured in titles but in who you married. When our CEO returned from his extended vacation, he didn't come to my office first. His wife did, with a smile that cost more than my car. She said, "I think this position would suit me better. Too bad I didn't just have a chair I held the keys to $400 million in revenue compliance, and I knew exactly when to pull them out. My name is Lauren Hartley, and for 13 years, I built something most people couldn't see, but everyone depended on the invisible foundation that kept Verigenics from becoming another cautionary tale in the biotech graveyard. At 44, I wasn't the face on our company brochures or the voice in shareholder meetings. I was the one who made sure those pretty faces had something legal to sell. The compliance framework I created wasn't sexy. It didn't trend on LinkedIn or get featured in TechCrunch, but it kept $400 million flowing through our accounts without a single federal investigation, FDA warning letter, or class action lawsuit. In biotech, that's not just competence, it's magic. I'd survived 3 CEOs, 2 mergers, and one particularly nasty whistleblower situation that could have buried us all. My office on the 14th floor wasn't the corner suite, but it had something better a view of the server room where every audit trail, every certification, every federal approval lived under my watchful eye. I knew where every digital body was buried because I dug most of the graves myself legally, of course. Then Greg Winslow came back from his 6-week executive wellness retreat in Turks and Caicos with more than just a tan. He brought Clarissa. Clarissa Winslow, née Morrison, was 36 years old and had pivoted so many times her LinkedIn profile read like a career roulette wheel. Fashion blogger, wellness influencer, creative strategist, digital transformation consultant. Now, apparently, she'd landed on her latest incarnation, special advisor on innovation at Verigenics. The title was as manufactured as her cheekbones, but when you're married to the CEO, job descriptions become surprisingly flexible. I first met her at the Monday leadership meeting, 3 days after Greg's return. She walked in wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salaries, carrying a rose gold laptop I'd never seen on our approved devices list. Security violation number 1, I noted mentally, though I knew it would never matter. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Clarissa," Greg announced, his hand possessively on her lower back. "She'll be joining our leadership team to bring fresh perspectives on operational efficiency." Fresh perspectives. In my experience, that phrase was corporate speak for someone's about to get fired. She took the seat directly across from me, which should have been my first warning. In 13 years of leadership meetings, that chair had always been empty, an unspoken buffer between me and whoever was presenting. But Clarissa didn't know our unwritten rules, or more likely, didn't care. "Lauren," she said, extending a manicured hand across the conference table. "Greg's told me so much about your dedication to process." The pause before dedication was deliberate. So was my smile when I shook her hand. "Process is what keeps us out of federal prison," I replied. "I'm sure you'll find it fascinating." She laughed, a tinkling sound that reminded me of champagne flutes breaking. "Oh, I'm more of a big picture person. I leave the details to people like you." People like me. The phrase hung in the air like a bad smell. Around the table, my colleagues suddenly found their phones very interesting. Even Marcus from legal, who usually backed me up in turf wars, was studying his coffee cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. Over the next 2 weeks, Clarissa embedded herself into Verigenics like a perfectly manicured parasite. She scheduled innovation sessions during my compliance reviews. She hired a team of 20-something digital strategists who walked around with ring lights and talked about disrupting the paradigm. She started appearing in meetings she hadn't been invited to, always with Greg's implicit blessing hovering behind her like an invisible crown. But it wasn't until she asked for access to the compliance dashboard that I knew exactly what game we were playing. "I just want to understand the workflow," she said during a Thursday afternoon ambush in my office. "Greg thinks there might be redundancies we could streamline." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. The afternoon sun caught the subtle work around her eyes, the too smooth forehead that never quite matched her expressions. She was beautiful in that expensive way that required constant maintenance, like a luxury car that depreciated the moment you drove it off the lot. "The compliance system requires specific certifications to access," I said. Federal certifications, the kind that take years to earn and maintain. Oh, I'm a quick learner, she said, that champagne flute laugh again. Besides, I'm not looking to replace anyone, just optimize. Replace? The word she claimed she wasn't thinking had somehow made it into the conversation anyway. I smiled and made a note in my phone. Thursday, 3:47 p.m. CW requests system access. When you've spent 13 years building fortress walls, you learn to recognize the sound of someone looking for cracks. The first protocol Clarissa eliminated was the morning verification checklist 47 checkpoints I'd personally designed to catch errors before they became lawsuits. Too rigid, she declared during a Tuesday all-hands meeting. We need to embrace agile thinking, not bureaucratic checkboxes. I watched from the back of the room as half the staff nodded along, seduced by buzzwords and the promise of less work. The other half, the ones who'd been around long enough to remember the Theranos scandal, shot me nervous glances, but I kept my expression neutral, taking notes on my tablet. Tuesday, 10:15 a.m., Protocol 1A eliminated without risk assessment. Within a week, Clarissa's digital strategists had infiltrated my department. Kids fresh out of college with degrees in communications and Instagram follower counts they considered qualifications. The one assigned to shadow me was named Toby, spelled with an I at the end. He insisted, like that made him special. So, what exactly do you do all day? Toby asked, slouching in my office chair while I reviewed FDA submissions, because Clarissa says most of this stuff could probably be automated. I didn't look up from my screen. I make sure the company doesn't accidentally kill people or go to federal prison. It's surprisingly time-consuming. He laughed like I'd made a joke. Yeah, but AI could probably handle most of that now, right? 3 days later, Clarissa announced the creation of a new position, Director of Compliance Innovation. The job description was a masterpiece of corporate nothing-speak, all synergy and transformation with no mention of the actual federal requirements that kept us operational. During the announcement, she stood at the front of the conference room in a white sheath dress, Greg flanking her like a proud parent at a recital. We're not eliminating roles, she assured everyone. We're evolving them. Lauren will transition to a more focused position, process corridor management, allowing her to concentrate on what she does best. Process corridor management. She'd literally renamed my job to make it sound like I managed hallways. That night, I stayed late, using my admin access to explore parts of the system I'd built but rarely visited. Deep in the architecture was something I'd created during the 2015 merger, a backup authentication protocol tied directly to my federal certifications. Back then, I'd been paranoid about losing access during the IT integration. Now, that paranoia looked like foresight. I downloaded everything: audit trails, certification chains, federal approvals, correspondence with regulators, 15 years of digital infrastructure flowing onto an encrypted drive labeled Audit Trail Vault 400M locked. As the progress bar crept forward, I thought about Clarissa's smooth forehead and empty credentials. By month 2, Clarissa had fully colonized the 14th floor. My compliance team was reassigned to her innovation lab, where they spent their days creating PowerPoints about reimagining regulatory paradigms instead of actually ensuring regulatory compliance. She'd moved Toby into the desk directly outside my office, now referred to as the Process Corridor Management Suite, on the new org chart. The breaking point came on a Wednesday. I arrived at 7:30 a.m. to find my dashboard access revoked. Oh, that, Toby said when I confronted him, not looking up from his phone. Clarissa said we're migrating to a new system. Something about centralized access points. I'm handling the compliance stuff now. You're handling federal compliance, I repeated slowly. You? The person who asked me last week what FDA stood for. He shrugged. It's not that complicated. Clarissa showed me how to use the templates. Templates for federal compliance. I felt a migraine building behind my left eye. I walked straight to Greg's office, past his assistant's protests, and found him on a video call with investors. He held up a finger weight while continuing to promise double-digit growth. I didn't wait. I dropped my laptop on his desk and pulled up the federal certification requirements. Your wife just gave control of our compliance system to someone who isn't certified, I said when he finally muted the call. That's not innovation. That's a federal crime. Greg's face went through several expressions before settling on condescending patience. Lauren, I understand change is difficult. This isn't about change. This is about prison. Your prison, specifically, when the FDA discovers we're operating without proper oversight. Clarissa assured me she has it handled. Clarissa couldn't handle a lemonade stand's health permit. His face hardened. I think you need to consider whether you're still a culture fit here. Culture fit, the corporate kiss of death. I picked up my laptop and smiled. You're right, I should consider that. While I do, you might want to review Section 9.b of my contract, the part about certification ownership. That night, I opened my personal laptop and reviewed the contract I'd negotiated 5 years earlier. Section 9.b was beautiful in its simplicity. In the event of involuntary termination without documented cause, all federal certifications held by the employee shall be deemed null and void within 48 hours of separation. My lawyer had called it overkill at the time. No one's going to fire you, she'd said. You literally hold their federal lifeline. I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it to paranoia. The working woman's best friend. The beauty of a well-designed system is that it works even when you're not there to run it, especially when you're not there to run it. While Clarissa played CEO's wife dress-up in my department, I spent my newly freed hours doing what I did best, documenting every meeting where she dismissed protocols, every email where she overrode safety checks, every Slack message where her digital strategist joked about compliance theater. I captured it all. My personal laptop became a museum of corporate hubris, each screenshot carefully dated and filed. But I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was creating insurance. Late at night, while Clarissa was probably at charity galas or getting her third facial of the week, I used my hidden admin access to review what Toby was doing with my system. It was worse than I'd imagined. He'd deleted entire verification chains, marking them as redundant bureaucracy in the change logs. He'd set up auto-approvals for documentation that legally required human review. Most damning. He'd been signing off on federal submissions with an electronic signature he'd created by copying mine from old documents. Forgery. Federal forgery, to be specific. I screen-recorded everything, my cursor moving deliberately across each violation like a teacher grading a failing exam. The metadata would show I accessed it at 2:43 a.m. on a Thursday well outside business hours. From my personal IP address. Plausible deniability is a beautiful thing. My official contract printed cleanly on the home printer I'd bought specifically for this moment. Heavy paper, good ink, the kind of presentation that said, legal document without screaming it. I highlighted Section 9.b with a yellow marker, old school, the way lawyers liked it. Then I made copies, lots of copies. On Friday morning, I arrived at the office at my usual 7:30 a.m., to find Clarissa sitting in my chair, my actual chair, behind my actual desk, like she'd already measured for new curtains. Lauren. She smiled that practiced smile. I was just getting a feel for the space. Greg and I think this office would be perfect for the innovation hub. It's a nice office, I agreed, setting my box of personal items on the desk. Good light, stable temperature for server access, clean sight lines to both emergency exits. She blinked at the emergency exits comment but rallied. Well, you won't need to worry about any of that anymore. We found a wonderful new space for you on the 3rd floor. Much more. Collaborative. The 3rd floor, where they put accounts payable and the people they were hoping would quit. How thoughtful, I said, pulling my framed certifications off the wall one by one. Certified Regulatory Affairs Professional, Federal Compliance Specialist, Quality Assurance Manager, Advanced Level. Each one represented years of study, thousands of dollars in fees, continuing education credits maintained religiously. Clarissa watched me pack them like they were participation trophies from a kid's soccer league. Soccer. You know, she said, attempting to girl talk, I really admire your dedication to all this paperwork. It must have been so fulfilling, in its way. Past tense. She was already writing my professional obituary. I wrapped the last frame in bubble wrap, taking my time. It has been, especially the federal licensing. Did you know those certifications are personally tied, non-transferable? The FBI takes that very seriously after what happened with Enron. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her Botoxed features. Well, Toby is working on getting certified. He's very bright. I'm sure he is. I sealed the box with tape, the sound sharp in the morning quiet. The next testing window is in 18 months. The wait list is already full, but maybe Greg knows someone. She stood, smoothing her dress. We'll manage. We always do. Yes, I said, hefting my box. You always do. I made one stop before leaving the building, the server room, where the ancient backup system still hummed along, forgotten by everyone except the woman who'd built it. I input a simple command, elegant in its simplicity, a timer, set for 48 hours from the moment my termination went through. When it reached 0, every certification tied to my name would flip from active to void. Every federal approval I'd signed would require re-verification. Every audit trail bearing my electronic signature would flag for review. It wasn't sabotage. It was exactly what my contract specified would happen. I was just making sure the system knew it too. My personal email dinged as I reached my car. The termination notice, sent at 8:15 p.m., right after I'd left the building. They'd probably drafted it days ago, waiting for me to clean out my desk like a good little displaced executive. I forwarded it to my lawyer with a single note, start the clock. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot I'd used for 13 years, watching the building where I'd built my career. Through the 14th floor windows, I could see shadows moving in what used to be my office. Clarissa, probably, maybe Toby, planning their innovative future with all the confidence of people who'd never had to face a federal audit. I pulled up my backup drive on my personal laptop, checking the folders one more time. Everything was there, including a special subfolder I'd labeled Succession Planning. Inside were the emails where Clarissa had explicitly stated she was taking over compliance oversight. The Slack messages where she'd told Toby to just copy Lauren's old signatures, it's all digital anyway. The recorded Zoom call where Greg had said federal regulations were more like guidelines when it came to innovation. 48 hours. They had 48 hours to realize what they'd done. I started my car and drove away, leaving 13 years in the rearview mirror. As I merged onto the highway, my phone buzzed with LinkedIn notifications. Former colleagues, suddenly very interested in keeping in touch now that I was gone. I ignored them all except one, a message from Marcus in legal. Building's going to be interesting Monday morning. Good luck, Lauren. Monday, 3 days after the 48-hour timer expired, when the first federal database updated with my void status, when the first client tried to verify our certifications for their quarterly review, when the first automated flag went up in a regulatory system that had no sense of humor about compliance gaps, I smiled and turned up the radio. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about what you do, it's about what you stop doing. The email announcing my replacement hit the company directory at 9:07 a.m. on Monday. I know because I still had access to the public folder and oversight that spoke volumes about their transition planning. Dear Veragenics family, it began, Greg's voice somehow oozing through the corporate speak. We're thrilled to announce an exciting evolution in our compliance leadership. Clarissa Winslow will be stepping into the role of Chief Innovation and Compliance Officer, bringing her unique vision to modernize our regulatory approach. Chief Innovation and Compliance Officer. They'd invented a title that sounded important while meaning nothing. I screenshot the email from my kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me as I added it to my growing collection. The announcement continued with buzzword bingo, synergistic approach, disruptive compliance methodology, next generation regulatory framework, not one mention of federal requirements, certification maintenance, or the 100 other details that kept a biotech company from becoming a criminal enterprise, but there was a professional headshot of Clarissa, airbrushed to magazine perfection, smiling like she'd just won a pageant. My lawyer called at 9:30 a.m. You see the announcement. Hard to miss. Did they send my termination paperwork? Friday at 4:47 p.m., no cause listed, just organizational restructuring. Perfect. And the 48 hours. Expired Sunday at 4:47 p.m. I could hear her smile through the phone. Your certifications should be showing as void in the federal database as of this morning. I pulled up the FDA's verification portal on my laptop, entering my certification number. Status void. Holder terminated. The same message appeared for my EPA credentials, my OSHA qualifications, my DEA licensing, 13 years of maintaining those certifications, and they'd evaporated exactly as my contract specified. Lauren, I have to ask, they do know about Section 9.5b, right? I mentioned it to Greg. He seemed more concerned about culture fit. Jesus. Okay. Well, I'm keeping my phone on. This should be interesting. By noon, my personal phone started buzzing. Unknown numbers I didn't answer, but I recognized the Verigenics conference room lines. They were probably discovering that innovation couldn't replace federal authorization. The first domino fell at 2:15 p.m., according to Marcus's carefully worded text. Parsons Pharma requesting updated compliance certs for Thursday's shipment. Toby doesn't know what they're talking about. Parsons Pharma, our second biggest client, worth $14 million annually. They required re-verification of our federal status before every major shipment, a requirement I'd negotiated personally after their own compliance scare 3 years ago. I made myself a sandwich and watched my phone light up with calls I didn't answer. Tuesday brought escalation. My LinkedIn showed 57 views from Verigenics employees, including 12 from the C-suite. Clarissa's profile still proudly displayed her new title, but her last post, something about reimagining regulatory paradigms, had comments disabled. At 3:20 p.m., a FedEx truck pulled up to my house. Signature required. Inside was a formal letter from Verigenics Legal, proposing a consulting arrangement to assist with transition matters. The number they offered was insulting, less than half my previous salary for what would clearly be crisis management. I read it twice, appreciating the desperation bleeding through legalese. They'd realized the certification problem but were trying to lowball me, hoping I'd panic about being unemployed. They didn't know about the folder labeled succession planning or the screenshots of Toby forging my signature. I composed my response carefully, CCing my lawyer. Thank you for your offer regarding transition assistance. After reviewing the terms, I must decline. As stated in my employment contract, Section 9.b, all certifications became void upon my termination without cause. Reinstating them would require new applications, which, as you know, involve extensive background checks, documentation of employment status, and proof of continuous oversight. I wish Verigenics the best in navigating this transition. I'm confident Ms. Winslow's innovative approach will find creative solutions to any regulatory challenges. Best regards, Lauren Hartley, former Internal Operations Director. I attached a PDF of Section 9.b, highlighted in yellow, and hit send at 4:59 p.m., just before close of business, just late enough to ruin someone's evening. Wednesday morning, the real panic set in. A friend still at the company forwarded me an all-hands meeting invite. Urgent compliance status update. Mandatory attendance. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., which meant they'd spend all night trying to find a solution that didn't exist. But the best part came in a text from Marcus at 11:43 a.m. Greg just asked if we can hire someone else with your certifications. When I explained they're non-transferable, he asked if we could just not tell anyone you left. I laughed hard enough to scare my cat. The CEO of a publicly traded company had just suggested federal fraud as a solution to the federal fraud his wife had already committed. It was beautiful in its stupidity. By Thursday, my phone had logged 43 missed calls from Verigenics numbers. My email showed increasingly desperate messages from HR, legal, and even Greg himself. The subject lines evolved from transition assistance request to urgent compliance matter to simply, please call ASAP. I didn't call. Instead, I printed every email, organizing them chronologically in a folder labeled Panic Timeline. My lawyer would appreciate the documentation. The crown jewel arrived Thursday night, a 12-page contract for emergency consulting services. They'd quintupled their offer and added a signing bonus. But buried in subsection 3.2 was what they really wanted: immediate reinstatement of my certifications and a retroactive validation of all documents signed in my absence. They wanted me to commit fraud to cover their fraud. The audacity was almost admirable. I opened my laptop and pulled up the screenshot of Toby's forged signatures. Then the email where Clarissa directed him to just make it work. Finally, the Zoom recording of Greg calling federal regulations guidelines. My response was brief. After careful consideration, I cannot in good conscience validate documents I did not review or approve. This would violate federal law and my professional ethics. Additionally, I've become aware that my electronic signature has been used without authorization on federal documents since my departure. My lawyer will be in touch regarding this matter. P.S. Congratulations again to Clarissa on her new role. I'm sure her fresh perspective will be exactly what Verigenics needs. I sent it at 11:58 p.m., imagining Greg's phone lighting up his bedside table just as he was falling asleep. Sometimes timing is everything. Friday morning, I updated my LinkedIn profile. Open to new opportunities in regulatory compliance and quality assurance. Within an hour, I had 3 recruiters in my inbox and a very interesting message from the chief legal officer at Strategen Biocore, Verigenics' biggest competitor. "Heard you might be available," she wrote. "We value experience and actual certifications. Coffee." I smiled and typed back, "Coffee sounds perfect. I know a place that makes excellent documentation. Macchiatos." As I hit send, my phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time, I recognized the area code, the regional FDA office. I let it go to voicemail, already knowing what Monday's news cycle would bring. Revenge, I was learning, didn't require anger or aggression. Sometimes it just required doing exactly what you said you'd do, when you said you'd do it, and then letting math and federal law handle the rest. The FDA voicemail was polite but pointed. "Ms. Hartley, this is Director Patricia Norwood from the Regional Compliance Office. We've received automated alerts regarding certification status changes at Verigenics. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss your recent employment status and any documents that may require review." I saved the message and forwarded it to my lawyer, with a note, "The wheels of federal justice turn slowly, but grind exceedingly fine." Monday arrived with the inevitability of a compliance audit. My morning coffee came with a side of schadenfreude as I watched my phone explode with notifications. The first was from Marcus at 6:45 a.m. FDA on site, full team. Clarissa tried to badge them into the building without signing them in. Security had to intervene. Of course she did. Federal investigators probably loved being treated like Instagram followers who just needed the right access code. By 9 a.m., LinkedIn was lighting up. "Does anyone know a compliance specialist with active federal certifications available immediately?" Posted by 3 different Verigenics employees. The desperation was palpable, like watching someone try to hire a pilot while the plane was already in the air. My interview with Strategen Biocore was scheduled for 2 p.m. I wore my best suit, the charcoal one that said, "I know where the bodies are buried and have the documentation to prove it." Their chief legal officer, Patricia Brennan, met me in a conference room overlooking the harbor. "I'll cut to the chase," she said after pleasantries. "We've been watching Verigenics' innovations with interest. When I saw you were available, I cleared my calendar." "I appreciate directness," I said. "What exactly have you been watching?" She smiled. Their last 3 quarterly filings showed interesting patterns. Compressed timelines that seemed impossible with proper compliance protocols. Then suddenly their head of compliance leaves and the FDA shows up. One might draw conclusions. One might, though I couldn't comment on any proprietary information. Of course not. But hypothetically, if someone with 13 years of experience building bulletproof compliance systems were available, and if that person happened to have relationships with key clients who value regulatory stability. Hypothetically, that person might be very interested in an organization that values expertise over innovation theater. We spent the next hour discussing Strategen's expansion plans, their commitment to compliance infrastructure, and a salary number that made my poker face work overtime. But the real moment came when she casually mentioned their recent bids for 2 major contracts. "Parsons Pharma is looking to diversify suppliers," she said, "and Meridian Biological is concerned about vendor stability. Both value impeccable compliance records. Parsons Pharma, my $14 million former client who couldn't get their Thursday shipment verified. The universe had a sense of humor. I left with a job offer and a start date 2 weeks out. Enough time to watch Verigenics implode while maintaining plausible deniability about the timing. Tuesday's news cycle brought the first public hint of trouble. Biopharma Weekly ran a small item, "Verigenics faces routine FDA inspection amid leadership changes." Routine. I smiled at the understatement. There was nothing routine about a full compliance audit triggered by cascading certification failures. My phone rang. Greg's personal cell. I let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Lauren, it's Greg. I think we may have had some miscommunication about your transition. I'd like to discuss a senior advisory role, reporting directly to me. Please call me back." Miscommunication, like firing someone without understanding they were the load-bearing wall holding up your federal authorization. I deleted the message. Wednesday brought escalation. A courier arrived with a new offer, Senior Vice President of Compliance and Regulatory Affairs, reporting to the board, not Greg. The salary was 20% above my old rate, with a signing bonus that suggested panic, but the best part was a handwritten note from Greg. "We need you. Name your terms." I photographed the note, adding it to my collection. Then I composed my response. "Dear Greg, thank you for your generous offer. However, I've accepted a position with an organization whose values align with my approach to compliance integrity. I noticed the offer includes retroactive authorization for documents signed during my absence. As you know from our previous discussions, this would constitute federal fraud. I trust Clarissa's innovative methods will find a compliant solution. Best wishes. Lauren. Peace. Section 9.b of my contract remains in effect. My lawyer has advised me to preserve all documentation regarding unauthorized use of my credentials. Thursday morning, the dam broke. An anonymous source leaked to Biopharma Weekly that Verigenics had suspended shipping pending compliance reviews. The stock price dropped 12% by noon. My LinkedIn messages included 7 recruiters, 4 former colleagues, just checking in, and one very interesting note from Patricia Norwood at the FDA, thanking me for my professional handling of certification transitions. But the sweetest moment came via a forwarded email from a friend in sales. Parsons Pharma had formally notified Verigenics they were moving their contract to a more stable partner. That partner's announcement would come Monday, my first day at Stratagen. By Friday, Clarissa's LinkedIn profile no longer mentioned her C-suite title. The Chief Innovation and Compliance Officer had quietly become Strategic Advisor, then disappeared entirely by close of business. Her last post about disrupting outdated paradigms had aged like milk in the sun. My exit interview with reality came in the form of a final message from Marcus. Clarissa resigned to pursue other opportunities. Greg asked if you'd consider coming back. I laughed until security asked if I was okay. I spent Friday evening packing my home office, carefully filing 13 years of documentation into boxes labeled by year, each certificate, each training record, each proud accomplishment that Clarissa had deemed replaceable by innovation. They'd learned that expertise wasn't just about knowing the rules, it was about understanding why they existed. My new Stratagen laptop arrived Saturday morning, along with a welcome basket and a handwritten note from Patricia Brennan. Looking forward to building something bulletproof together. I opened the laptop and logged into my new email. Already there were messages from Parsons Pharma and Meridian Biological, CCing me on their transition plans. The subject lines were professional, but I could read between the lines. Thank God someone competent is handling this. As I set up my new home office, my personal phone buzzed with one last Verigenics number. This time, I recognized it the CEO's office landline, the one Greg used when he wanted to seem official. I answered on the 4th ring. "Lauren," Greg's voice had lost its usual executive timbre. "I wanted to apologize personally for how things were handled." "I appreciate that," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Is there any chance, any possibility you'd consider consulting on the FDA situation, just to help us through the audit?" I looked at my new Stratagen laptop, then at the box of certifications I'd earned over 13 years. I'm afraid that would be a conflict of interest with my new position, but I'm sure Clarissa's fresh perspective will innovate a solution. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. "She didn't understand," he finally said. "The complexity, the requirements, the fact that compliance isn't optional," I suggested. "Yes." "Well, that's a shame, but I'm sure Toby can figure it out. He seemed very confident when he took over my dashboard access." Another silence. Then the FDA found forged signatures. I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the loudest response. "Lauren, Greg, I need to go. I have preparations to make for Monday. Good luck with the audit. I hung up before he could respond, then blocked the number. Some bridges weren't worth maintaining, even for